You got the thing you wanted. The promotion came through, the salary jumped, the apartment upgrade happened, and then you sat in that new apartment on a Tuesday night and felt almost nothing. Not gratitude, not satisfaction, just a quiet, unsettling question. Is this it? If you felt that, you're not broken and you're not ungrateful. You've just run straight into one of the oldest traps in human psychology. Here's what this video is going to give you. A specific 5-minute technique Seneca developed. He called it practicing satis, that stops the hedonic treadmill before it starts. By the end, you'll have a concrete 3-line journal prompt that defines, in real numbers and real terms, what enough actually looks like in your life. Not a vague aspiration, a specific boundary. That's the thing nobody teaches you, and Seneca figured it out while sitting on a fortune that would make most billionaires uncomfortable. Rome, 58 AD. A man named Lucilius, a mid-level government official in Sicily, writes a letter to his friend in Rome. He's anxious. He's achieved what he set out to achieve, and it doesn't feel the way he expected it to feel. His friend in Rome is Seneca, and Seneca at that moment is one of the wealthiest private citizens in the entire Roman Empire, worth the equivalent of roughly 300 million modern dollars, owner of multiple villas, advisor to Emperor Nero. Seneca writes back, and what he writes is not a pep talk, it's not reassurance, it's a confession. He tells Lucilius in what becomes letter 27 of the Epistulae Moralis, "I am still sick myself." He's admitting that all his wealth, all his status, all his influence, none of it has resolved the thing Lucilius is describing. He's not writing from the top of the mountain, he's writing from the same confusion, just surrounded by more marble. That honesty is what makes Seneca different from every motivational speaker who ever lived. He doesn't pretend the achievement didn't matter. He doesn't tell you to be grateful. He says, there is a structural problem with how you are measuring progress, and no amount of getting more things will fix a broken measurement system. That's not a metaphor. That's a literal diagnosis of what psychologists now call the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill, the term was coined by psychologists Brickman and Campbell in 1971, describes the human tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness, regardless of what happens to us. Win the lottery, you're back to baseline within 2 years. Get the promotion, baseline within months. The raise, the car, the relationship, each one produces a spike, then adaptation, then the same hollow baseline again. Seneca didn't have the term. He had the exact same observation, 2,000 years earlier. In letter 16 of the Epistulae Moralis, Seneca writes, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who hankers after more." Read that again slowly because it's not a platitude, it's a precise psychological claim. Poverty, by Seneca's definition, is not a financial state. It's a cognitive one. It's the state of perpetual insufficiency, the feeling that the current amount, whatever it is never quite the right amount. He's describing something that has nothing to do with how much you have and everything to do with your relationship to having. And this is where Stoic philosophy introduces a concept that most people have never encountered in its original Latin form. The word is satis. It simply means enough. But in Stoic practice, satis is not a passive feeling. It is an active discipline. It is something you define deliberately before you start wanting. Here's why this matters psychologically, not just philosophically. The brain's reward system, specifically the dopamine pathways in the nucleus accumbens, is not wired to register satisfaction. It's wired to register anticipation. The neurochemical hit comes before you get the thing, not after. This is why the planning phase of a vacation feels better than the vacation itself, and why the week before a promotion often feels better than the week after. You are neurologically built to want, not to have. Seneca understood this not through neuroscience, but through ruthless self-observation. He watched himself want a villa in Baia, a famous Roman resort town on the Bay of Naples. He got it. He watched himself immediately begin wanting improvements to the villa. He watched that pattern repeat across every domain of his life. And then he did something almost no wealthy person in history has ever done. He wrote it all down honestly, named the mechanism, and shared it with a friend. That documentation, the Epistulae Moralis, 124 letters written in the last years of his life, is essentially the world's first rigorous journal of psychological self-examination. Not theology, not mythology, just a man watching his own mind with clinical precision and reporting what he sees. And what he sees, over and over, is the gap between achievement and satisfaction, the gap that no achievement ever closes. Now here's the question that should keep you watching, because we've diagnosed the problem, but a diagnosis without a treatment is just an elegant way to feel bad. The real question is, what did Seneca actually do about it? Not philosophically, practically. What was the concrete behavior change he made and recommended? Because there is one. It's specific, it's counterintuitive, and it directly contradicts everything the modern productivity and success industry tells you to do. The practice is called meditatio inopiae, the meditation on scarcity. Seneca describes it in letter 18. He recommends that several times a year you voluntarily live as if you have almost nothing, not forever, not as punishment. For a few days, you eat the simplest food available, you wear old clothes, you remove comfort deliberately. The purpose is not asceticism for its own sake, it's calibration. You are resetting your baseline so that your ordinary life feels like abundance again. His exact words in letter 18: set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, is this the condition that I feared? He's not telling you to be poor. He's telling you to confront the fear of being poor, and discover that the reality of it is far less terrifying than the anticipation of it. That's the psychological mechanism. Fear of loss, not the loss itself, is what drives the treadmill. This connects directly to another Stoic practice, premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, the deliberate imagination of worst-case scenarios not to induce anxiety, but to neutralize it. When you've already sat with the reality of having less and discovered you survived it, that it wasn't catastrophic, the fear of losing what you have loses most of its power over you. And when that fear loses power, the compulsive need to acquire more loses power along with it. There's a documented historical moment that illustrates this sharply. In 62 AD, 4 years before his death, Seneca asked Nero directly for permission to retire from public life and return his accumulated wealth to the emperor. He wanted to give it back. Nero refused the request, but the fact that Seneca made it tells you something crucial. He had reached a genuine internal definition of enough. He wasn't performing simplicity. He was trying to actually live it. The historian Tacitus records this moment in the Annals, Book 14. Seneca tells Nero, I have had 17 years of your favor. My life has been prolonged, and my wealth has grown to such a pitch that nothing is lacking to my happiness but a limit to it. That phrase, nothing is lacking to my happiness but a limit to it, is one of the most psychologically sophisticated sentences any wealthy person has ever spoken out loud. He's saying, my problem is not that I have too little. My problem is that I have no defined ceiling. A ceiling, a defined upper limit. That's the thing modern culture explicitly refuses to give you, because the entire engine of consumer capitalism runs on the absence of a ceiling. There is always a larger apartment, a newer phone, a better neighborhood, a more prestigious title. The system is architecturally designed to ensure that your definition of enough keeps moving forward just slightly faster than your ability to reach it. Seneca saw this in a slave-based imperial economy. The mechanism is identical. Here's why this matters tonight, in your life right now. Not in 2,000 years of history. Tonight, 2 scenarios, both probably familiar. First scenario, you're earning more than you ever have before and somehow saving less. Your expenses expanded to fill your income, then slightly exceeded it. You got raises, your baseline rose with them. You are objectively wealthier than your previous self and subjectively feel about as financially secure. Which is to say, not very. Second scenario, you achieved a goal you spent years working toward. A role, a relationship, a creative project, a material thing. And in the weeks after achieving it, instead of satisfaction, you felt a strange urgency to set a new goal. Not because the old goal was wrong, because without the next goal, there was nothing between you and the question you'd been successfully avoiding for years. What is all of this actually for? Both of these scenarios are not character flaws. They are rational responses to a system with no built-in endpoint. The solution is not to want less in some vague spiritual sense. The solution is to define the endpoint deliberately, specifically, and in writing, before the next goal appears on the horizon. This is what Seneca means by satis, not a feeling, a defined number, a list, a boundary you choose rather than one that gets chosen for you by the culture around you. Here's the step-by-step technique, the actual 5-minute possession and income audit that operationalizes Seneca's satis practice. You need a piece of paper or a notes app. 3 columns. This takes 5 minutes if you're honest and about 2 weeks if you keep lying to yourself. So try to be honest on the first pass. The columns are what I have, what I use, and what I actually need. Not what I want, what I need in order to live a life I consider good. In the first column, list your major possessions and income streams. Not every object in your apartment, but the significant categories: housing, transportation, income level, subscriptions, savings. In the second column, mark which of these you actively use and value in your day-to-day life. Not which ones you paid for, not which ones you think you should value, but which ones actually contribute to days you describe as good. Be ruthless here. In the third column, you write a number next to each category, the minimum version of that thing that would still constitute a good life. Not a bare survival life, a genuinely good one. What income level specifically would make you feel secure without being a slave to maintaining it? What size home? What kind of transportation? This column is your satis threshold. It is, by Seneca's definition, the thing you are already working toward. You've just never written it down before. The gap between column 2 and column 3 is almost always smaller than expected. Most people discover that they already have most of what constitutes their own definition of enough, and have been unconsciously striving past it toward a target that was never theirs to begin with. That discovery is not depressing. It is profoundly clarifying. It answers the question that the Tuesday night apartment feeling was actually asking. Now the closing prompt, the 3-line journal entry that anchors this in your actual life. Line 1. Write the sentence, "I have enough when blank," and fill in the blank with something specific and measurable, not a feeling, a number, a description, a concrete condition. Line 2. Write the sentence, "I am currently blank percent of the way there," and be honest. Line 3. Write the sentence, "The next thing I am pursuing is blank, and it is or is not inside my satis threshold." That third line is the critical one, because most of what we pursue is not inside our own satis threshold. It's inside someone else's threshold, a colleague's, a parent's, an algorithm's. Seneca's entire project in the Epistulae Moralis is teaching Lucilius, one letter at a time, to distinguish between his own desires and the desires that have been installed in him by the culture around him. That distinction is not easy, but it is the only distinction that matters. There is one more thing worth saying about Seneca, because he is easy to dismiss. He was wealthy. He was powerful. He occasionally wrote about poverty from a villa. His critics, ancient and modern, have pointed this out. Seneca himself pointed it out. In letter 20 he writes, "I do not yet practice what I preach, but I am working on it, and I am showing you the road even if I have not yet traveled it fully." That honesty is itself the Stoic practice. Stoicism was never a philosophy for people who had already achieved virtue. It was a philosophy for people actively trying to close the gap between who they are and who they want to be. Seneca's value is not that he succeeded perfectly. His value is that he failed honestly, documented the failure in extraordinary detail, and kept returning to the practice anyway. That is the model. Not perfection. Honest return. The hedonic treadmill will not stop running on its own. Your brain is not going to spontaneously rewire its dopamine system because you've had a philosophical insight. What changes things, what the research on happiness and what Seneca's practice both converge on, is the deliberate, repeated act of defining enough before you start wanting. Not once. Every time a new goal appears. Every time the culture hands you a new definition of success and you almost accept it without examining it. There's a line in letter 5 that Seneca writes almost as an aside, the kind of line that sounds simple and turns out to be the whole thing. He writes, "Hoc primum philosophia promittit sensum communum humanitatem et congregationem." This is what philosophy promises first: common sense, humanity, and fellowship. Not transcendence, not escape from desire, common sense. The simple, difficult act of seeing clearly what you have, what you need, what is enough. The Tuesday night feeling, the hollow moment after the achievement, is not a sign that you chose wrong or worked toward the wrong thing. It's a signal. It's your actual self surfacing through the noise of accumulated external goals, asking a question that deserves a real answer. Seneca heard that question in himself and in Lucilius. He didn't solve it by acquiring more or by walking away from everything he had. He solved it by finally, specifically, defining what would be enough. Tonight, do the audit. 5 minutes, 3 columns. What you have, what you use, what you actually need for a life you genuinely call good. Write the 3-line journal prompt. Fill in the blanks with honesty, not performance. And then look at what you wrote and ask Seneca's question. Not how do I get more, but is this the condition I feared? Because the answer, almost always, is no. And that answer changes everything. If this video gave you something useful, the best thing you can do is share it with one person who's currently chasing a goal that doesn't feel quite like their own. Not to stop them, just to give them Seneca's question before they get there. 2,000 years ago, one of the wealthiest men in Rome wrote a letter to a friend saying, "I am still sick myself, but here is what I am learning." That's all this channel is, the letter passed forward.